Okay, so we're just going to start with a very cool quote that I think will inspire you. If somebody offers you an amazing opportunity, you're not sure you can do it, say yes, and then learn how to do it later. And I think that's a really good attitude to have when you're a little bit scared and nervous to take something on. Just have that in the back of your mind, because you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. And this is pretty much the story of my life, because I never planned on an awful lot of what I ended up doing, but I've managed to grab opportunities and achieve some pretty cool stuff. So I wanted to tell you why I love what I do, or I feel so lucky to have sailed around the world so many times. I love being out there, and I think in the environment, I learn something new every day. And I think that's probably why we keep going back out there. And I think I keep going back because I always know I could do it better next time. My Bondi Globe was actually back in 2008, which seems like a really long time ago now. But I think of how much I've learned since then. Since I did my Bondi Globe, I've been around the world 3 more times. And I've learned an awful lot, and I've probably changed how I sail now. So I know that if I was to go and do it again, I'd probably do a much better job. That being said, the boats have really moved on and the game's changed a little bit now, but it's definitely a game that I'd like the chance to play again, maybe. So how did I get to my Bondi Globe? Well, my Bondi Globe was in 2008, and that's a picture of my RLymYC 60 that I took around the world. But I got there through a series of adventures that gave me the confidence and the opportunity. In 2000, I started working for the British sailor Mike Golding, and I was the skipper of his corporate yacht. So I used to take his sponsors and his guests out sailing. And I went down for the start of his Bondi Globe, and I worked as part of the team. I packed his food, I dived on the boat and cleaned the bottom of the boat every day in the freezing cold water of Les Sables d'Olonne. And I learned what was involved in a Bondi Globe, and it must have sparked a little seed in my mind for the future. And I had a job, and then I got an opportunity. That opportunity turned into a world record, and a dream became a reality. So I started as a skipper on the Global Challenge, where I took 17 people on a 72-foot boat round the world. And it was from that opportunity that Sir Che Blythe then suggested that I take the same boat, but without the 17 people. So I did just that. And I had to learn how to do all the sail changes without all the other people on board. It was a bit of a big boat with lots of space inside without 17 people filling it, but it smelt a lot better. So that was my going around the world the wrong way, so against the winds and currents, where you go down the Atlantic and you turn right. And I realized that everybody else goes the other way around the world. So then it was a case of an opportunity to go and do the Bondi Globe. Now, the Bondi Globe is a mixture of adventure and racing. For me, this was my step into the professional race world. But different budgets mean people have different programs and different objectives. So although all these boats lined up to sail around the world, people had different plans. Some people were going to win at all costs. Some people were going on an adventure of a lifetime. Some people spent loads of money, and some people spent not a lot of money. So it's amazing how one race you can have loads of different reasons for being there. And I think that's one of the interesting things, because it's not always those with all the money that do the best job. Sometimes we can see that somebody that makes clever decisions and has the best preparation can actually do a really good job, and yet they don't have the biggest budget. So I think that's really important to remember, that it's not always the case of the best boat. And I think if I think about my low points and my high points when I'm sailing around the world, I think this is a picture of my mainsail that I sailed around the world with on the Bondi Globe. It didn't start like that. It started pretty good. And as I got to south of Australia, so pretty much halfway around the world, it all started to delaminate and basically fall apart. And I was in constant communication with my shore team and with the sail makers. What should I do? What repairs can I do? And they said to me, whatever you do, don't let the fibers get exposed. So I looked at it and I thought, well, it's a bit late for that. And every time I did a jibe in the Southern Ocean, or as I came back up the Atlantic and I had to do some tacks, it was like confetti falling out the back of the sail. It was like blossom falling. It was just a shower of sailcloth every time the sail flapped around. And I tried lots of different things to fix it. And in the end, I took a section of a sail that I wasn't going to use anymore and covered as much of it as I could. And that was a big operation. And then we just decided that I was just going to sail as hard as I could and we'll worry about it later, because it was occupying so much energy and nervous energy and worry and stress. Yet I couldn't stop the process of what was happening. And what I did find out was that I finished the race and I finished in 6th place. So a pretty good result. And yet my mainsail was like that for half the race. So don't stress if something breaks. You can overcome it and you'll be surprised at what you can achieve. So sail damage is not a race stopper at all. In fact, it was probably helped me. I didn't have to put a reef in because it was airing itself. It was letting all the extra wind go through it, so I didn't have to worry. And then a high point, I would have to say, is the start and the finish of the Bondi Globe for me. It's so magical. And I don't know whether any of you saw the start about 10 days ago. But you can see in the background here, there's all these people. Well, at the weekend last week, when the Bondi Globe started for this edition, there was nobody there because of the restrictions and lockdown in France. But even without the people, there was still the emotion. And I think what France is very good at when we're talking about sailing races is they absolutely love the sailors, they love the adventure, they love the story, and they love what they do. And when you finish the race, it doesn't matter whether you're the winner or coming in last place or any position in between, they cheer you exactly the same. And I think it's interesting that sometimes it's the people that told the best story and shared their race the best that are remembered and not necessarily the winners. So when you go around the world, it's just a much bigger adventure than it is just a pure race. And I think that's that story of everyone having a different budget and a different objective for their trip around the world. But it's just such an emotional feeling. It's amazing all these people come out to see you. And don't forget, I'm British and I was in France getting that kind of reception. It was amazing. They make you feel very special. So if I think about my scariest trip experience around the world, and there's been a few, I think it was on my solo wrong way round trip. So my second time around the world, I was on my own on the challenge boat without the 17 people. And I was sailing around the Southern Ocean and I saw my first iceberg. And can you see an iceberg in that picture? Yeah, okay. I've just got all your pictures, all your faces, so I can't see if it could see. And at first I was quite excited. I was like, oh, an iceberg. I haven't seen one of them. So I took the picture and I did kind of rub my eyes a few times just to check that I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. I even sent the picture home to the team to say, tell me what you see in this picture, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating or going crazy. And I was quite excited, sent it to my mum. Isn't this cool? Anyway, 3 days I spent in amongst icebergs. And that was probably my scariest point. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, I was scared, I was nervous, and I didn't know if there was going to be a way out. And what had happened was a really large area of Antarctica had broken off and it was slowly breaking up, and it moves really slowly in the south, even though we're getting buffeted by storms. And as it was breaking up, I was in amongst this massive area of icebergs. So what was exciting to start with was pretty scary. And I remember that time when for the first time for 3 days, ahead of me, there wasn't any ice on the horizon. And I was so relieved, and I had the best sunset ever. And I took that as a sign. And the wind actually allowed me to sail in the right direction for once. And I was like, I've made it. The water temperature went up 1 degree from 1 degree to 2 degrees. And I was like, this is it. This is me on the way home now. And so I went from wanting to give up and join the penguins on the iceberg to being determined to make sure I got to the finish line. So that's my scary bit as well. Back to me. So I just wanted to share with you the fact that I always feel that I'm learning when I'm on the water. And the best way of doing that is to try and sail with better sailors. If you sail with somebody who's better than you, you're going to learn from them, and that experience will really help you. And when I first started sailing an IMOCA boat, I sailed with Nigel King in some races because he had some really good experience, so I could learn from him. I sailed with Miranda Merrin, who's currently doing the Bondi Globe, and I sailed with Brian Thompson, who's one of the fastest men on water. So they all had lots of experience, and I just gained as much as I could from watching them, speaking to them, working with them. And it really allowed me to fast track my learning. And then the other thing that really makes a difference is having a coach, having somebody to be objective and see from the outside what you're doing, so they can let you know when you could be more efficient, you can do things slightly differently, and it'll help you. And that's the best way to improve. And even now, after 6 laps of the planet, I'm still really keen to have external input so that I can try different things and see if it helps me go faster or we do things better. So I think getting the right people around you to help is really good, and people that you trust so that you can grow in confidence, because after all, sailing's all about your confidence. I'd say that you have to be willing to make mistakes so that you can learn from them. Don't be scared of getting it wrong. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get wet. So it's really important that you are open-minded to try new things and you're not afraid to get it wrong. And I also think it's really important to realize that it's not just enough to be a good sailor, to be an offshore sailor. Being a good sailor is just one aspect of being an offshore sailor. You also have to have a lot of other skills, and this is really important if you're going to be a solo sailor, obviously. You need skills in navigation, in weather, in engineering, communications, first aid, sail making. There's so much going on that you really need to have an ability in all these areas. So sailing is literally just one aspect of what you need to be thinking about. And I'd say that doing the ocean race, when I was sailing with a team, really helped increase my intensity. So you sail a lot faster and harder because there's always somebody on deck making the boat go fast. And when you sail on your own, you have that downtime when you're sleeping and you're not checking everything. And I think as you get used to that, you get more inclined to make that happen all the time. So I probably sail at a much higher intensity now, and I'm much happier at higher speeds. After all, if you want to sail fast, then you've got to practice sailing fast. Otherwise, you'll never get used to it. It's a little bit like the first storm you go into is really scary. It's really windy. It's a bit scary. You don't know what's going to happen. And then the next storm you go into, you've already got that experience. So you're a little bit better at it and it's not so bad. And then by the time you get to the next storm, you're like, whoa, this is easy. I do this all the time. So it's really a case of the more you practice at something, the better you're going to be, the more confident you're going to be, and the better you get at everything. So now is a perfect time for any questions. Oh, I can see there's things in the chat. This is good. Any questions? I'm all yours. Shall I go down what's in the chat? I'll go down what's in the chat. So I've got a question here. What's the fastest you've been in a boat? Before I closed my eyes, because I was down below and holding on and I was getting a bit scared, so I closed my eyes in excitement, I saw 34 knots. And that was the first time in the Southern Ocean in an IMOCA 60. So you're surfing down the waves and everything just goes fast. And it took a little while to get used to that. I've since now sailed a Mod 70, where I was sailing with Brian Thompson, and he said to me, okay, the rule is don't go faster than 30 knots. We're on a delivery. We want to make it nice and safe. And I started driving and the boat just started accelerating. And I did 35 knots quite happily. And it was the most normal thing ever. So it's amazing how quickly you get used to speed when you're exposed to it. But I don't think I could have been responsible. I was very happy Brian was there to look after me. I've got a question here. How do you fit all the food on board and what do you eat? Oh, food is good food. And it takes a lot of time and practice to get the right food. because when you eat freeze-dried food is what we take, so it's very lightweight and easy to pack. It's very easy to think you like things, and then after about 2 months of eating similar stuff, you get a bit bored of it. But it's really important that you have that variety to keep your interest, because eating is so important to keep you able to make the right decisions. And I don't know whether any of you saw the story from Sam Davies, because you pack it. I packed bags of 10 days worth of food, so I could eat anything for 10 days from this bag. And I wasn't allowed to move on to the next bag until day 11. So I was very strict, but it stops you eating all the good stuff and leaving all the rubbish. And I don't know whether you saw Sam Davies write this week that she had been stacking her food and she had an explosion. She had a tin of sardines and all the tin had broken and all the oil had come out, and it made all our food smell fishy. So she was having to clear that up, which isn't a good move. I have a question. How long did it take you to go the wrong way around the world? When I went the wrong way around the world on my own non-stop, it took me 178 days. So that's 6 months. I missed Christmas, New Year, my birthday, weddings, babies, deaths, marriages, Easter, missed out on Easter eggs. I missed out on quite a lot. I was trying to get home for my boyfriend's birthday and I even missed that. What else have we got? I've got loads of questions. These are great coming in. What's your favorite part of the world to sail around? Well, I think I might be a little bit strange because I really like the Southern Ocean. It is wet, cold, grey and miserable, but it is also some of the best sailing you can do. So it is amazing. And I feel that we're quite privileged to sail in that area and see the albatross, and it is quite special. So I quite enjoy it, and I feel very lucky that I've had 6 successful laps down there, because many people go down there and they don't have as much success. What do you eat? Freeze-dried food, and I take a friend of mine's mum makes some very good shortbread, and so she always makes me a tin of round the world shortbread biscuits. So they're my little treats. And my morale boost when things are tough is a packet of Haribo sweets. But don't tell anyone. I don't take any chocolate. What animals did you see when you sailed around the world? Albatross, dolphins, whales. I've seen some sharks as well. Flying fish. I hate flying fish. They're my worst things ever. When you're in the tropics, they are part fish, part bird, and they fly out the waves, and sometimes they land on your boat. And if you don't find them, after a few days, they smell really bad. But they're just horrible and really smelly. I don't like them at all. What is your favorite boat that you've sailed on? Well, I absolutely loved my experience on the Mod 70 Trimaran, because that was really special to get that chance to go and sail a boat at 35 knots and it be the most normal thing in the world. But I think for my round the world, the best boats I've sailed on are the RLymYC 60s. And I love the development. Now we can see them with foils and coming out the water. That looks like a whole new way of sailing. So I haven't done much of that. So hopefully in the future, I'll have the opportunity. What made you go from a dancer to a sailor? Who says I don't dance when I'm sailing? Nothing wrong with a little boogie in the middle of the ocean, and my karaoke skills are amazing as well when I'm on my own in the middle of an ocean. How do you avoid hitting floating objects when you're sleeping? It's luck. So when I was doing it, you kind of keep your fingers crossed, because you do have whales that sleep just below the surface of the water, as well as containers that fall off container ships that float just below the surface of the water. And so it's always a risk. And what the boats have now in this edition of the Bondi Globe is they have a camera at the top of their mast called Oscar. And it is an infrared camera, and it can pick up objects about 600 meters away. 600 meters, that doesn't sound very far. I don't know the exact details on that, but it can pick up an object, which hopefully can then alert you to make avoiding action. And they also have on their keels pingers, which make a ultrasonic sound that allow that noise to disturb a whale, hopefully, so that they can get out of your way. So these boats really don't want to hit anything. So the technology's developed and they have these systems in place, which is fabulous news, both for the wildlife and for the sailors and their boats. What's my next challenge? I'm working really hard to try and sail, hopefully, fingers crossed, the mixed double-handed offshore class is going to come into the Olympics in 2024. So I'm sailing on home waters in the cold of the UK and sailing double-handed in a 33-foot boat, which is a lot of fun. Longest sleep I had when sailing single-handed alone. I used to sleep cat nap. You do 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and if things are really good, so if the wind is stable and you're not near any shipping or hazards, then a long sleep for me was an hour and a half, but I never slept longer than that. But sometimes I could wake up, have a look around, check everything, and then go back to sleep. But you get used to, your body does adapt. It takes about 7 days and you adapt, and that becomes a normal way of living. You listen, you sleep listening to your boat, and so you can hear a change in noise, and then you know you need to do something. And as you get better and more relaxed and confident with your boat, you recognize all the noises, so you know exactly what everything is when you're lying down below and you think, oh, that's the leech line, I need to go and do that, or oh, I need to shake the reef out, the wind's dropped, I can feel it. So you get used to all the noises and you get to recognize what it all means. What do you think about the Hugo Boss boat? Well, it's leading the way, so I think Alex may have got it right. Fingers crossed. Wouldn't it be fabulous to have a British sailor on the podium winning, because he's got third, he's got second, so it's the only place he wants to get. But he's the most relaxed I've seen him, the most confident I've seen him. He looks like he's enjoying it. He's communicating really well, which is a really good sign that he's confident with his boat. So my fingers are crossed he has a good rest of the race. There's a long way to go, but he seems to be really happy in what he's created. It's very different to what we're all used to seeing him down below. I think he may be even sailing around the world in his slippers. Who knows? I've had a reminder, because one of my adventures I did was the Three Peaks race. And the Three Peaks race it's a combination of running and sailing. So you sail to different places, and then runners go ashore and run up the highest mountain in Wales, the highest mountain in England, and the highest mountain in Scotland. But if there's no wind, the rules say that you can row your boat. And somebody's just reminded me that we rowed through the Menai Straits, and the only way I could keep going was to sing. So I told you, karaoke skills are very important as a sailor as well. Are the new boats cheating because you can spend all day and all night inside, warm and dry? Cheating, or maybe they're sensible. These new Bondi Globe boats, these guys, it's the speed they're going at is actually quite scary. And if you're on deck getting hit by that water all the time, it's one thing on the Volvo Ocean race when you've got a team of people there and you're all looking out for each other. But when you're on your own, it's a safety measure that's, I think, has been a really good thing. The more protected the sailors are, the more confident they are to push their boats a little bit harder, and we're seeing that in the performance. So I think what may look like cheating and we could call cheating is probably a very sensible thing regarding safety. Fastest boat I've sailed is a Mod 70. What is the most challenging thing for you to fix while sailing offshore? What you always want to hope is that nothing's going to break that's going to be a showstopper for you. So if your mast comes down, that's pretty much your race over. If the keel falls off, that's your race over a lot of the time, depending on where you are. And I think anything that's a big distraction, so something that's going to occupy all your time and energy trying to fix it. So we rely quite heavily on electronics, and when you're sailing solo, you're sailing with an autopilot, so the machine's driving so that you can rest or look at weather or do other things. So I think for me it would be the black magic of electronics, and if something goes wrong there, that's a real stress. You have a lot of backups, but ultimately you've got to try and fix it. And it always seems to involve your anemometer, so your wind indicator at the top of the mast. They have a little PCB board in it. So it's really annoying because it always generally involves a trip to the top of the mast, which is not my favorite thing. Who do you think will win this Bondi Globe? Well, my money was on Jeremy Bayou on Chiral, because he was the best prepared and had spent the most time on his boat. But my heart wanted Alex Thompson and Sam Davies on the podium, and maybe that can come true. But I think the ones to watch will definitely be Alex, linked out, Thomas Ruon, and Charlie Dallin on Apivia. But as we know, 33 boats started, 33 boats will not finish, and anything can happen, and there's a long way to go. What was the biggest wave you sailed on? Well, I've never sailed where we could measure it, so they all look pretty big at sometimes, and sometimes you get it just right and the boat accelerates really well and it's really fun. Sometimes it's all a bit scary and you end up pointing down this big trough and you think, how am I going to get out of this? And to date, touch wood, I have. So some of them are exciting waves, some of them are scary waves, but thankfully I've never measured them. So I know that on Alex Thompson's website, he's got some information there where it says what the wave height is. So you'll be able to follow that as you follow the race. How did you get your first yacht racing experience from only dinghy sailing? My first yacht racing, so I did my qualifications at UKSA on the Isle of Wight, and I applied for a job that came up there, and it was with Mike Golding, the British sailor based in Southampton. And I went and I was a crew member on his corporate charter yacht for a year. And then I told him that I'd had a really good year and I wanted to go and do something different. And what I didn't know was that the skipper was moving on to something else. So he then asked if I wanted to skipper his corporate charter boat, which was a massive step up, a massive opportunity, and one I said yes to, and then worried about it afterwards. So I used to, when I was in the winter preparing and making sure I knew everything about the boat, I also used to phone up the harbour master and find all the empty pontoons, and I would practice mooring my boat up and taking it off the dock, so that when I had people on board, no matter what the weather and the conditions, I could always nail it and look really good. Because one thing Mike Golding said to me was, you could say anything to anybody out on the water and you can pretty much get away with it. But every time you come into the pontoon, people will tell if you get it wrong or right. So that stuck with me. So I made sure I spent a lot of time practicing with a lot of fenders out to make sure I didn't do any damage. Did you have to go up the mast when solo? Unfortunately, yes. I was a little battered and bruised from it. But you do feel really, I practiced a lot on the dock. I was preparing in Plymouth and I used to practice going up and down the mast. And every day I'd get a bit further until I actually got to the top. And I used to entertain everybody in the harbour because they'd be all like, well done, you got to the next spreader today. And then the next day I'd get a little bit further until eventually I could go up and down happily. And you do feel really good when you've cracked it, but it's still not my favourite thing. So that's a good thing about sailing with other people, is you can find somebody else that likes doing that type of job. How did you wash your clothes? I didn't. When you sail on your own, you don't need to change your clothes that much. And obviously I smell of roses. You change your clothes for the different temperatures, and you have a spare set in case you get wet. And pretty much you can celebrate a different ocean or a different rounding a cape. There's 3 great capes and you can celebrate that with a clean pair of pants. That's quite nice. I always put a clean pair of pants on for Christmas Day. That's probably more information than you need. Okay, so is there anybody, I think I've done all the chat questions. Is there anybody that wants to come off mute and ask me a question?
Okay.
How long did it take to sail around the world the right side?
Well, the right way for me was 95 days. And now the record is 74 days. So I think that somebody in this Bondi Globe will go around the world in about 70 days, I think. So it's getting faster and faster. So that's why I have to go back and do it again so I can do it better. But it's a lot quicker than going the wrong way round, that's for sure. Any more questions?
When you're
Yes.
Oh, yeah, go on then.
How did you get to the top of the mast on your own?
You use a clever climbing system. So you have like a little foot loop, and it allows you, it's called prossicking, and it allows you to go up a rope. So you have a rope from the top of your mast to the bottom, and you basically climb up that. And then you have a system that allows you to get back down again. But it is a little bit scary, and you have to have some confidence to do it. And you always wear a crash hat.
Got no one to winch you up.
There's nobody there to winch you up. I know, that's the nice thing about sailing with a team, because then you can just say to everybody, put me up, or even better, just pick somebody else to go up.
What's your favourite conditions for sailing? Like, do you like it windy? Do you like it light? Do you like it in the middle?
I find light winds much more difficult because you have to really concentrate, but I quite enjoy the challenge and the way you can just tweak little things and make a big difference. You kind of get in the zone, but it's quite hard to keep that focus and concentration. And I like the big stuff because it's got something to deal with. I quite like that. And I'm better known for going upwind, and I seem to always drive quite fast upwind. So I actually quite like downwind sailing, but I've obviously done a lot of practice upwind going the wrong way around the world.
What's your what are you looking forward to most in your Olympic campaign for 2024? Hopefully, if you go.
Hopefully, yeah, fingers crossed. I really like the development of, we don't know what boat it is yet, so we're just trying to sail as best we can and work out the best way. I think double-handed is a really nice way to sail because it's like the best of both worlds. You've got an extra pair of hands when you need to do something in a hurry or you need some help, but you're making it all happen yourself because that person has to sleep at some point. So it's a really nice way to sail. These boats are fun, and to me, from being on a big boat, they feel quite little. So I'm quite enjoying it.
Did you ever think you weren't going to make it around the world?
No, but I think I'm too stubborn to give up or give in. There are a lot of people that thought I wasn't going to get round on my wrong way round. And as soon as I got a hint of that, I was determined to make sure that no matter what, I was going to make it happen. I think if you're a solo sailor, you have a high level of resilience and you're pretty stubborn.
Did you go up the mast when you were sailing solo?
I did, yes. I got a few bruises and it was a bit scary, but I have done on the challenge boat and on the RLymYC 60.
How do you steer the boat?
The autopilot does it. So you put your confidence and your life in the autopilot's hands. So you're trusting the electronics to do a good job, and you just hope that it all works while you're doing it.
What happens if it doesn't do a good job?
You come back down again pretty quickly.
Oh.
How difficult was it to get sponsors for your first event?
I was very lucky back then. It was before the financial crash, before the economic crisis, and life was very buoyant back then. So the financial sector was, very generous, and I had an insurance sponsor for the first trip around the world. And then I managed, after 3 months of negotiation, to get them back on board for the next trip. It's got progressively harder as the financial crisis hit, and now we've got a pandemic, and sponsorship's much harder to deliver. But I think expectation is very different, and I think the world has moved on from saying to somebody, oh, you can put your brand on my sails. I don't think that's enough these days. I think these days you have to offer a lot more, and the platforms have changed. The digital platforms available, social media that's available, the interaction and video that's available. And we're in a world where brands want to appeal to the conscientious consumer. So they want to do something that's environmental or makes a difference in the world. It's not a case of taking people sailing or putting a brand on a shirt or a sail. So I think people need to think very differently about sponsorship. So it's definitely evolved in my career, and I'm still playing that game where I'm trying to attract sponsors in the right way and hopefully deliver an interesting platform that they get excited about.
I have a question. Have you ever suffered an injury while sailing solo, and how did you deal with that, if you did?
I've been very lucky. I've had a couple of times where I've had a poorly tummy, where I haven't waited for my freeze-dried food to rehydrate properly. And I've had a couple of times that I've had to take a photo. What you do is you have a medical support that's kind of available to you on the phone, no matter when you need them as you go around the world. And I had a knee injury and I had to take a photo of both my knees and send it to them. And they came back because they know exactly what's in my medical kit, so they can give me the advice of what to take and how important it is to make sure things are right and wrong. And they're very realistic medics as well, because quite often a doctor will say to you, "Oh, keep it clean and dry." And of course, you're in an environment on a boat where it's impossible to keep anything dry. So it's about having the right medicine for the conditions you're in. So I've been lucky. I've only had to take a few anti-inflammatories and painkillers. Otherwise, I've been pretty good. Touch wood.
When you're sailing,
Oh, go on. One of you go.
when you're sailing solo around the world, do you ever talk to yourself for decisions?
All the time. It's like a running commentary, and it's a really good thing to do. Even now, when I'm sailing double-handed and we're practicing stuff, I'm having a kind of an inner conversation with myself, and I have to remember sometimes to have that out loud so the person I'm sailing with can actually hear me. But it's a really good way to go through the procedure. So if we're going to tack, I'm like, right, traveller, runner, new sheet, have a look at the sail, winch handle. Okay, I'm ready. So I kind of talk through the process, and it's a really good way of making sure that no matter how tired you are or what the conditions are like, you do the same process each time, so that you should have the same outcome each time. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about all your maneuvers, whether you're on your own or with somebody else. It's a really good process to go through to make sure that you don't miss any steps.
What happens if you break your bone?
If you break a bone, you do carry this really clever plaster that if you just soak it in water and put it on, it will make like a splint for you, and you can bandage yourself up. You take a lot of painkillers and you try not to use your arm. Or the best thing is try not to break a bone in the first place.
Oh.
Where do you go to the toilet?
Well, on my first 2 trips around the world, I did have a toilet on my boat, so I was very lucky. But the last 4 trips around the world, I haven't had a toilet. Now, we did have a toilet on the Volvo Ocean Race boat, but we selected to keep it closed because it made the boat very smelly with 10 people using it as a toilet. So what we use is a bucket, and we call bucket and chuck it. So you go in a bucket and then you chuck it over the side. And if you're going for number 2s, I hope nobody's eating their dinner. If you're going for number 2s, then you use like a potato starch bag, a biodegradable bag, and you can go in your bag and then you tie it up and then you put it over the side. That's made everybody blush, hasn't it?
Are there any more questions? Because we've done a great job. Dee's done a fantastic job. Anybody, any other questions? 2 more questions if there are any more.
Yeah, let's not finish on the toilet.
No.
When you're going around and you're in the Southern Ocean, obviously you probably wear a harness, but do you ever worry that you might fall off?
There is a fear that you can get washed off with holding a sail or with the wave action. So you learn very quickly that if you're on your own, it's pretty much useless unless you stay on the boat, because
there's a motto that says, some people once said to me that if you fall off, you don't want to stand there watching the boat sail away from you, you just want to die.
That's right. I mean, if you're not attached to the boat, if you've got your life jacket on, that's great. You're going to float and watch the boat sail away for you, which is why you'll see a lot of the guys don't wear a life jacket, but they wear a harness so that they can actually be attached to the boat. Because you realize pretty quickly that the whole event is over if you're not actually still on the boat. So that's really important. And then as a crew, if there's a team of you, you wear a life jacket because you know that the boat will come around and get you. And you practice that as well, so that everyone's got confidence that no matter what, the boat will turn around and come and get you. And you use a lot of equipment. So if you're in a crew where the boat can come back and get you, you've got an AIS beacon and an EPIRB, and you've got all this equipment in your pockets or in your life jacket, so that you've done as much as you can as far as safety is concerned, so that you have every chance of survival. But the best thing you can do is clip on and be attached to the boat.
So there's one other question, which I think is a great one from Hattie Rogers on the chat, I think, there, Dee.
Oh yeah, how different is the physical and mental prep for the double-handed versus the Bonde? The interesting thing for me is I have to actually learn to communicate a lot more again. And it's not too bad because I've just come from the ocean race where as a team and communication was key. But on the Bonde, you could internalize a lot of the conversations because nobody's there to listen to you anyway. But I think with the double-handed, it's really important that you're both on the same page and you're both agreeing with the process and the procedures and what you're planning to do. So it's really important to have good communication. And that works from whoever's helping you, from the coaching, from on the water, from the suppliers, from the boat design, from what you're doing in the setup, right through to what the objectives are and how you're going to make them happen. And it's really important that you both understand the plan. And then if there's going to be a change to that plan, so if the weather's slightly different or if the tides are slightly different or something breaks and you're having to adapt. So I think that kind of communication is really important. And that's the thing you need to practice. 9 times out of 10, most of the issues are down to communication, which is why it sometimes feels easier when you're on your own.
Well, Dee, thank you very much. I'm sure everybody's got hundreds of questions and we could have you here till next Wednesday. But I'd like to personally thank you for taking the time to give us the inspiration and the motivation to go and think about how we could do something near and some of the things that you've done. And on behalf of all of the sailors and all the parents, thank you very much.
That's an absolute pleasure. Enjoy your sailing and I wish you all the best. Stay safe.
And if
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
take
you.
care.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Dee.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
From Clive and Val.
Um,
Thank you.
go there.
That's cool.